it's not an important issue for me. It's an important issue for every single human being in this country and on this planet. I suffered from eating disorders and anxiety as a young person, and it took me a while to heal. So I know what it's like to suffer in isolation.
Good afternoon and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Tara Parker Pope, editor of the Wellbeing Desk here at the Post. Today I'm joined by Sophie Grégoire Trudeau, author of the new book, Closer Together. Sophie, welcome to Washington Post Live.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this kind introduction. I have to say, I looked you up a little bit, and I have to say I collaborate with Dress for Success. I love volleyball. You use science and data to explain mental health and well-being in people's lives. Thank you. It's an honor for me to join you today, and all of you.
That's so kind of you. I appreciate that. Yes, Dress for Success was a wonderful organization that I volunteered with for many years. So nice to hear that from you. So let's talk about your book. This is part memoir, part self-help. Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write this book?
I think I was born inspired. I grew up in nature from 0 to 4, and I was really in contact with the elements. My parents let me, play outside by myself, and I developed a sense of solitude, but also I would say of loneliness. And I danced in between constantly as an only child, and I really wanted to find nourishment in my connection with others. And I think my early childhood really kind of molded me in that way and wired my brain in that way. I had two very affectionate parents who obviously in their own stories and traumas were dealing with their own obstacles in their own lives. And I think as an only child, you internalize a lot of this. So I was wearing a cape, wanting to save my parents on one side and not want to wreak havoc or change anything, or I had to be the perfect girl in order to not kind of disrupt all that was already happening. And when I reached my teenage years, I started suffering from an eating disorder. I researched my own condition because I was an applied student in school, and I realized that I didn't understand why I was going through this. I understood what it was, but in those days, bulimia meant, she purges herself, and people knew nothing about it. So as I went through the years and suffered a lot in isolation because of all of the guilt and the shame that accompanied it, at some point I decided it was enough. And in my book, Closer Together, I talk about that moment where I kind of saw the little Sophie and the big Sophie wanting to take care of her and say, enough. So I called my mom and she helped me along the way. And long story short, when I started telling my story about how I suffered, as I became a new radio and television host in Quebec, I decided, okay, I'm going to work with this foundation who devotes, time and skills to help people who suffer from these addictions. And it changed my life. It gave my inner compass a sense of direction. It gave me a sense of integrity inside of me as how I was going to serve as a human being on this planet. What was my purpose and my passion mixed together? And so I realized that by telling my story, and I thought I was going to lose my contracts the next day, that people will be like, oh my God, we're not hiring her anymore. But it wasn't the case. There's always resistance, yes, but I pushed that aside. And it led me 20 or so more years later to put this into a compilation, I would say, of my life story, because we can only teach by experience, and mixed with all the privilege and the luck and the incredible network that I've been exposed to and that I'm curious about in the science and neuroscience, therapists, psychologists, couples experts, love experts, and put it all together so that I would do like a brushstroke from childhood, teenage years, adulthood, aging brain. So everybody can actually find a space in this book that will resonate with them, no matter where you are in your life right now. And I understand that I want this book to allow people to know themselves. That's really what it's about emotional leadership.
Well, tell me, what is the story behind the title? Why did you choose the name Closer Together?
Yes, it's not a coincidence, and you know, I think you've written 3 books. You know that choosing a title is always complicated because a lot of titles are taken out there, and you have to really find integrity with your content and with your title. So I realized that my biggest lessons that I've learned along the path, and even especially as well on the co-political path, and seeing people from all walks of life thrive or suffer in different kinds of conditions throughout this planet, that we're all one trauma away from each other. It takes one dramatic life event or a series of little traumas that are chronically there, but that you don't really realize. And at some point, your body says, I can't do this anymore. My body's giving me signs, or my mind is giving me signs in different ways because they're related. And I've reached a point of depletion or over anxiousness or, lack of sleep. And I know so many humans around me and probably listening right now who might be suffering from this as well. So because we're all one trauma away from each other, I thought that Closer Together is really the reflection that, yes, unhealthy human connection can cause deep ache and deep emotional wounds in a human being. But getting closer together and using healthy human connection is the way to healing and the way to build healthier democracies and to come closer together with all the crises that this world is facing.
Yeah, I think that sense of shared humanity and a common experience is really powerful. So when you talk about your teenage years with an eating disorder, is that what you want young girls or boys today to take away from you talking about your experience, to reach out to, what
Well,
is the message you're hoping they'll get from this?
right. I think that when we start sharing our story, we open a space of vulnerability that allows others to do the same. If you look at Me Too, if you look at other movements in society for better well-being, when somebody sometimes who's got a voice, and I've always taken my voice seriously, hopefully without taking myself seriously. So it's part of my purpose and to be of service and sharing my story, because when you work from a place of authenticity and you're not there to please, but more to help and to contribute, I think people sense it. And I hope that when people read this book, whether you're a teenager suffering from an eating disorder, or by the way, any other kind of addiction, it's all the same thing. It's a very similar incentive reward mechanism in your brain. And all compulsions and addictions stem from a longing for emotional nourishment that is not taking place, because we talk about a lot about trauma these days, and how trauma is not only what's bad that happened to you, but it's also what's good that never took place. And sometimes we're like, well, it was my family, it was normal, but maybe you did lack something, and maybe it's still active in you because the inner child in us is always active for the rest of our lives. The imprint from 0 to 3 in our childhood bond of attachment is in the brain.
I think your use of the word nourishment and emotional nourishment is interesting in the context of eating disorders, because so much of the focus is on food. When you're talking about the sort of emotional nurturing we need to give ourselves, do you want to talk more about that? I know you've also discussed other mental health issues like anxiety. How, is there a prescription for dealing with these issues, with these mental health issues?
So, mental health is not just the absence of mental illness. It is the fabric of our lives. How we eat, how we sleep, how we converse with ourselves when no one's looking. How do we treat ourselves? What we bring our attention to, what we consume every day, who we hang out with. That is the wheel of our own mental well-being. So, I think we have to be careful at pathologizing our stress and anxiety. In a very large part, and I talk about this in the book a lot, in a very large part, we are only reacting to abnormal exterior situations in the way that we can, cope in a way. And our emotional longings, when they go unnoticed and unserved, the 4-year-old child who's crying inside of us, right? To go deep into vulnerability, what happens to a 4-year-old child when nobody pays attention to their sadness? It just becomes worse, and there's neglect and a sense of abandonment or whatever it is. But if we don't address the tension in ourselves, the tension needs the attention. and I'm quoting Dr. Gabor Mate, who I worked with for the book here. It is very important that, stress comes from a dysfunctional relationship with the present moment. When we are constantly, especially as mothers and women, our plates are overflowing. We're trying to hold the emotional load of every single person in our family. We're trying to perform at work. We're trying to keep the household, clean and tidy and take care of our partners. And we put a lot of our needs last. And now they're looking at a lot of autoimmune diseases that are linked to women's health in personalities that are really putting everybody's needs before theirs. But that's just a parenthesis. But it's really important to understand that anxiety and stress, we don't need to pathologize them right away. And now they're even looking into more ADHD problems and how anxiety is the source of that. So I think that we need to catch our nervous system reacting to life early. We don't teach kids how to pinpoint their emotions, explain them, regulate their own emotions, what happens in their own bodies when they feel angry or sad, where does it hurt exactly? Can we pay attention to it? It's a very simple process that could change a lot of lives and make these kids better emotional leaders towards themselves and therefore become leaders in the world. So this work is not only serving as the riverbed for a healthier society, but it's also very accessible. And there are simple tools that we can integrate into our lives to deal better with stress and anxiety.
Well, why don't we talk about some of those tools? You mentioned children and you're a mom,
Yeah.
and I'm sure a lot of parents are looking for guidance on how to help their children in this way so that they don't have to deal with it all as an adult. Can you talk some about the tools? I mean, do you practice mindfulness? What are some of the ways we can get there and some practical ideas?
So first of all, the most important thing is that if you're a parent, biologically or not, if you're mentoring some young person, if you're in contact or communication with young people around you, depending on what you do on your professional path, you have the power and the responsibility in many ways, and I can only speak from my experience, but I include myself in here, is to look at your own trauma, whether big or small, to look at your insecurities and to figure out why you have the personality that you do, why you react to life the way that you do, and to not pass along a generational, emotional legacy to our kids that they do not need to carry. I'm 49. I come from a generation that I call cycle breakers. There's so much addiction that came before me, and on both sides of my family, in my case. And at some point, it takes one person from one generation to say, enough. We need to understand what's happening. We need to go within. But here's the thing, going within hurts because it means facing your truth, whether it's true as an individual or it's true as a society. So the first work we need to do as mature growing adults is to take responsibility for our individualization process. And that means looking at why we act and react the way we do in life and look at our own insecurities. And then the practical ways, there are so many practical ways. And I think you should go with what calls you, with what you feel that, it adds a little warmth to your day, or it makes you happy, or you feel 100 times better after. So is it moving? Is it a certain sport that you like to practice? Is it paying attention to your garden? Is it, going for a walk? Is it taking deep breaths in and out in silence? Is it actually finding yourself in silence? Is it mindfulness practices like martial arts, drawing, creative writing? There are so many ways where the brain feels in rest mode. And playfulness, by the way, when a mammal is sick, they stop playing. It's the same thing for human beings. And I explore this in Closer Together, that playfulness sends a message to the brain and to your nervous system that there's no saber-toothed tiger. You're safe, you're fine. And we as human beings, when we stop playing, it's also not a great sign. So playfulness is really important. And this means kind of like unstructured play, whether it's, I don't know, playing hide and seek with your kids, or, dancing in the middle of the kitchen with your romantic partner, whatever it is. In the little details of life, you're telling your brain, you're not hijacked by an alert mode here. You're going to be okay. But when all the outside signals that we get in our everyday lives are telling us, saber-toothed tiger coming in, ambulance, alert, alert, alert. What's happening here, Tara, is that most people are getting chronically stuck in their sympathetic nervous system, So the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, has two branches. One is sympathetic, fight, flight, freeze. One is parasympathetic, rest and digest. So when the stressors of our life keep us, and when the injustices in our world keep us in alert mode, we become chronically sick physically and mentally. So it's quite a pickle we're in, but it's also incredible to see that human connection and simple tools can change our minds, and that our minds can change the structure of our brains. You must
Let's
love
go.
this.
This is one of my favorite topics. I think you're really a lot of what you're describing is self-compassion and, giving ourselves a break. We're so hard on ourselves on a daily basis. I mean, do you feel that? Why do you think people struggle with just being kind toward themselves?
Because we're not taught it.
Right.
In the end, the old Cheyenne proverb that says, in the end, we will save what we love what we understand, and understand what we have been taught. This is true for the environment, this is true for people around us, and it's true for ourselves. So when we live in a society where we don't think we're worthy of rest, and when rest is the only way the mind and the body make sense of life, no wonder we're insomniacs. No wonder we have sleep disturbances. No wonder we're stuck in our alert mode constantly. So it's incredibly important to look at how we live in our culture and how the constant stressors, we're telling young girls at 6, 7 years old how to hate themselves from the get-go, to not age, to not accept their own mortality and natural processes in life. We create a huge distance between older people and younger people because they're no longer under the same roof for so many different structural and economical reasons in our lives. But what we're doing there is that we're really creating a deeper abyss in a passage, a natural passage that where we should be transmitting so much more wisdom and energy. The young feeding the old with their hope and their dreams, and the old feeding their young with their experience and wisdom and perspective. So when we lose that, we also lose a sense of belief in something greater. And because religion is eroding for different reasons, some good, some bad, I think our general faith in what unites us, that is greater than what the eye can see, is also eroding. And therefore, when you look at the polarizing and divisive forces in this world, you realize that the most unhappy human beings, and I discuss this with a psychologist in the book, the most unhappy human beings are the ones who can't trust in others. And when we cannot trust in others, it means that we're moving from a place of insecurity. So emotional leadership can create more security within one's self, and therefore feel less threatened by the difference of the other, and cope with the external elements of life with more adaptability and resilience.
I think some of these ideas that were hard for individuals to tap into, I want to go back to this notion of playfulness. I feel like that's a really actionable thing that after people, after this show wraps up and, people can kind of take a breath and say, playfulness, like how can I add more playfulness into my day? That feels like a really specific goal that could be very life-changing for some people.
So what's fascinating is that, our 200,000-year-old brain that we all share as a hard disk, the programming differs on whether you've had a healthy, unhealthy, secure, or insecure bond of attachment. And then your life experiences determines a lot of the rest, in epigenetics, we call. But playfulness, so when you look at our primitive brain, it is kind of like in default fear mode because we had to protect the tribe. It's our survival instinct. And, always looking out for that saber-toothed tiger to make sure our tribe is secure. And we look for comfort. So after work, when you're tired and you had a huge day and you're on the public transport and there's noise everywhere, you get home, you don't even know when you're going to start dinner. There's 3 kids there. One's going to one activity, the other one's going to another. You don't have time for yourself. It's overwhelming. We're tired and we feel depleted, and we're trying to push. But when we do this, we just push our alert mode even more. So when you come back from that, hard day at work or whatever it is that you do, even if you're at home with the kids, it's a hard day at work as well. Your system and your brain is like, okay, I want the couch, I want the beer, the glass of wine, I want the TV show, which once in a while is absolutely fine. We all do it, me included. But we have to become more conscious. we didn't come onto this earth to be happy, all rosy, happy. We came here to be conscious. Therefore, because the brain has a deep kind of like is set in our primitive way to be in fear mode and to watch out for danger and to seek comfort as a survival mechanism, we need to work hard to actually find a conscious way of living and being happy as well. So we have to push our brain a little bit and insert micro habits in our lives, like playfulness, to take things a little bit more lightly in such a world where the light and the darkness dance sometimes way too close together. I refuse to let my arms down and not believe that the light is always stronger than the darkness if we unite and if we continue to work hard to get closer together, no pun intended, but it's really the only way that we'll be able to navigate what's coming. So playfulness is not that difficult to create in your lives. On the on the train here from New York to DC, I had a huge garment bag with all my stuff, and I was walking beside the train, and I stepped over my garment bag and fell like face first.
Oh no.
To the sidewalk.
Terrible.
Hilarious. And I was taught to laugh in those moments. Obviously, when somebody gets hurt, it's something else.
Yeah.
But it's the little things where you're like, it can be light in our hearts and in our minds, because it feels always so heavy. When you look at the state of the world, when you look constantly in news, it feels heavy to carry. But we are creatures meant for play as well. So whether it's, I don't know, playing a card game with a friend, whether it's, having a practical joke book, whether it's pulling a little prank at a colleague at the office, and good mischief, not bad mischief here. Let me be clear.
Right.
Whether it's, watching a show that makes you laugh, whether it's phoning a friend and, remembering some nourishing and funny moments together, the brain will catch on super quickly. So the more we do it, the more it becomes where we bring our attention to, the neurons fire together. And when we do it often, it becomes a personality trait. So something tells me that I must have been laughing a lot in my life, because it's really part of my daily life. And it doesn't mean that everything is light. I search for authenticity and depth, and I'm an eternal student, and I'm thirsty for knowledge. But it puts everything into perspective when we learn how to play and integrate play into our lives. And don't we need a little bit more of perspective and discernment?
I think that's great advice. Before we run out of time, I want to get to a few listener questions. But first, I want to ask you about your personal situation. In August, you announced that you were separating from the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. And I want to ask you, would you have done anything differently with the book, said anything differently? Have you been hearing from women who are coping with, relationship issues and separation and divorce issues? What sort of insights can you share based on this very personal experience you're going through?
Right. A couple of things. First one is, of course, I wish I didn't have to share with the whole world the state of my relationship. But because we are a couple and a family who don't keep secrets from each other, because we have an open flow communication, because we still love each other, respect each other, hold each other in our arms, and are authentic and just real, and we accept that it's painful. It is what it is. It is painful. It is painful to restructure a relationship when we haven't learned that it doesn't mean that it's an end in itself. And there's been complete strangers. I mean, I never believe in human beings being actual strangers, but still, people I've never met in my life who have come up to me in recent months and just looked at me in the eyes and said, I admire your bravery. I'm here with you. I'm struggling right now, and you're giving me courage. When somebody tells me this, it gets to my heart. And it confirms that I have to continue being authentic and being truthful. Does it mean that I have to share every single detail of my life? No, that's not what it means. But it means we have to continue being truthful to each other. And, and I think it's Esther Perel who says this, and she's a great ally and a friend. And she says, first of all, longevity is not automatically a sign of a successful relationship. When do we ever hear this? And this doesn't mean I don't believe in perseverance in long-term relationships, but longevity is not an automatic sign of successful relationship. And we don't have to kill or slay a relationship in order to change its structure. In our society, when we have two words to define what relationships are, success as marriage and divorce as failure, there is conscious uncoupling, and I think it has helped people to have a sigh of relief in some ways. But if we work on our own emotional leadership, if we are secure enough in ourselves, and it takes two secure people, it takes two to tango, or three or four, whatever how you define your love life, it's easier to keep open communication. It's easier to preserve the beauty and the history of what came before and what will come next. It is not an end in itself. Some parts of it are changing, but it's not an end in itself. And I hope that my story can inspire others. That's not why I move the way I move from within. But if it does, then yes, let's empower each other.
So I hope we have enough time. I want to get to two listener questions. The first one is from Ivy Armstrong of Canada. And she asks, you've gone through tough times in a pretty public way. How do you stay grounded when big life events hit the media and public discussion? So just give us a tip for staying grounded during difficult times.
That's a tough one, because
Okay.
if you haven't been, in how are we going to call this, public office, I guess, there's things that happen that people don't know about, and the chronic stress that it kind of like instills in your mind, because your family and your partner or your kids physical and psychological security is often at risk in different ways. Now I interact with people who are raising families in service to their country. I have much more empathy, compassion, and understanding of how they try to deal with those stressors. So what she just asked is important, because people feel something similar on social media: constant bullying, constant cruel intimidation. It's chronic. It's always there. I can only answer from my experience, but I can tell you one thing at 49 that I'm proud of as a woman myself, as an ally, is that I've been disciplined to get, and for me, it's yoga and yoga nidra and meditation. I've every single day, whether I was in tears, in sweats, in confusion, trying to navigate the debris of my own life and my own confusion, show up on your mat. Get there, whatever happens, happens, and accept that life also means uncertainty. And when you are secure in yourself, people's critique and abuse in some ways, they don't get to you the same way, because you know who you are. You sit in yourself knowing who you are, what you stand for. Does it mean we're invisible and we don't feel anything? Absolutely not. I'm a big sensitive heart. I'm a lover. And yeah, of course it hurts at times. But we have the duty to be secure enough to continue to serve ourselves and to serve each other. So there's a big lesson, again, of an emotional leadership here, and discernment, and trying to create distance between, by the way, a minority of people who are insecure emotionally, who send out hatred and bullying emotions towards other people, and that shows emotional immaturity and lack of emotional leadership.
Well, thank you for that. Let's see if we can get one more question in from the audience. This is Cheryl from British Columbia. She
Hi, Cheryl.
asks, you are a role model to many and served as a calming, steady voice while you were the Prime Minister's wife. Do you see yourself staying in the political spotlight?
Thank you, Cheryl. That's a good question, because my answer is atypical because I never perceived myself as someone's wife, number one, or as an unofficial First Lady of Canada. I don't, because I've met so many people who hold so many big roles and have so many big accomplishments, and people who have no titles, no roles, and very little accomplishments according to our notion of success. The one lesson I've integrated is we are all the same. When you start believing in your own title, in your own position, or the spotlight, you're disconnected. I refuse to stand in that light of confusion. I want to see clearly. I want to get the debris out, so that when the spotlight is off, and when, people don't know me sometimes for the last name that's, after Sophie Grégoire, when all that is gone, who is left? That's the person I want to get to know myself. That's the person I want to serve other people. That's where I move from. So wherever you are in your life right now, Cheryl, or anybody who's listening, and you feel that, the outside world is judging you, or, you're in that spotlight in your own community or in your own family sometimes, and people put so much pressure on you. If you do the work of leading yourself better and actually having love and patience and tenderness and compassion for yourself, knowing when to rest and taking the time, your life will change. It will, from the inside out.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I think that is just the perfect place to leave us. I think that's such a great sentiment. So, Sophie Grégoire Trudeau, thank you so much for joining us on Washington Post Live. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Same here, Tara, and thank you to everybody. Be well on your path.
And thanks to all of you for watching. If for more of these important conversations, get a subscription to the Washington Post. You can get a free trial at washingtonpost.com/live. I'm Tara Parker Pope, and thanks again for joining us.